Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Barrett, Dr. B, and I am here with Dr. V today. We're just going to confuse you guys all day long. But we've got a super interesting approach to headaches. And so, Dr. V, I would just like to start off with, tell me about your philosophy of headaches.
Wow, great place to start. Yeah, early on I had headaches myself, and so I made it my mission to figure out the different patterns that ultimately whittled down to 7 different patterns of headaches. And I find that virtually every headache will be one of those 7 patterns. So we can go from there and then identify what gland or organ is compromised, triggering those headaches.
Okay, all right. So let's just put this into action here.
Right.
So I get migraines, and for me, they often start with this pain in the back of my neck, right here. It radiates forward. And sometimes that's with stress, sometimes not.
Mhm.
But invariably, if I don't do anything about that, if I don't do something to get that muscle pain out of there, then I will get an aura. I start seeing the flashing lights, the jagged lines, all the things, and
Wow.
then I've got a migraine for 3 days.
Oh no. Mhm.
And so, like, when you say that headaches are related to organs,
Mhm.
can you just give me, like, what would that be? What kind of organ would be going on with something like that?
Yeah, that's in fact the right side of headache, as you described yours, you basically just trace the gallbladder meridian. So it does kind of that ram horn thing on the right side of the headache. So I use on the right side of the head. So I used that early on 30 years ago now, crazy as that is, uh, that to help me figure out what was causing it. So identifying that gallbladder meridian that it goes there, there was tools within this approach called applied kinesiology that help me identify all that. There's muscle weaknesses, the popliteus little muscle that supports the knee, for example, that will get weak when the gallbladder is compromised. If you're seeing a chiropractor, for example, C6 is typically going to be out. You want to get adjusted there. That would give some temporary relief, but we want to look deeper, obviously, at why, say, for example, C6 or T4, the fourth thoracic between the shoulder blades, why those areas are out or misaligned. That's the structural component to applied kinesiology. Then we've got the chemical component. So, is it a food trigger that caused the gallbladder, in this case, the right side headache case, to be compromised? And so there's specific food triggers, there's supplements that will help that area function better. And then you talked about stress as well. The emotions associated with the gallbladder, for example, are things like anger, frustration, resentment. So it could actually be one of those types of triggers that then causes the gallbladder to kind of go into spasm, if you will, and trigger a right-sided headache. So with this applied kinesiology, we can take all that into that under one umbrella and identify the structural component to it, the nutritional component, the supplemental needs, or potentially even the emotional triggers, and then release, if you will, those emotional triggers so that we don't have those recurring causes, plaguing one's life.
Yeah, so what's so interesting about this is that you are a chiropractor and you're saying, okay, C6 is out. And I feel like for so many people, that's the end of the story. It's out. You have to put it
Right,
back in. But
right.
what you're saying is very different and unique. You're saying it's out for a reason, and our
Right.
job is to figure out what's going on related to gallbladder function that is
Mhm.
causing it to be out in the first place, right?
100%.
Okay. All right. So just walk me through this. I'm not familiar with this approach. I really want to learn.
Okay.
So what are some things that you would do to help the gallbladder, or what kinds of things might be going on that irritate the gallbladder, particularly to give people these kinds of headaches?
Right. Yeah, and that's really what it's all about, is trying to identify what those triggers would be, right? So gallbladder takes the toxins, if you will, out of the liver, and then squirts them into the colon right when we eat fats. And so if we're not eating enough good fats, then the gallbladder's not squeezing, not contracting, not cleansing it properly. That's a potential trigger. Or if we're eating too many bad fats, trans fats, for example, fried foods, that type of stuff is a very common compromise for the gallbladder. Another, probably the most common trigger I see is the pesticide glyphosate, which is the toxin, if you will, from Roundup, that is fairly well known to actually inhibit bile production. And so if we're not producing bile properly, then we recognize that that would cause, in this case, a right-sided headache. Early on, years ago, I used to say, oh, wheat was a trigger for gallbladder, and I thought it was inhibiting bile production till I heard Stephanie Seneff actually talking about the mechanism there and how glyphosate in fact inhibits bile production. And then you talk a lot about leaky gut. Glyphosate also inhibits bile production, but it's going to potentially obliterate the intestinal lining, and so can set up that kind of brain fog and some of those leaky gut symptoms, which is a whole other fun discussion.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'm getting a sense for what you mean about, how the gallbladder might not be functioning and what could be causing that. What
Mhm.
about in terms of treatment? It sounds like one thing you're hinting at is getting your fat intake right in terms of nutrition.
Yeah.
Are there other nutritional changes that somebody like me would need to make, or supplements that we may want to consider? What does treatment of the gallbladder involve?
For sure. Yeah, and that's what it comes down to, is identifying what that would be. We talked about fat metabolism. One of the potential things to consider is balance between omega-6s and omega-3s. Most people, most Americans in that sad, standard American diet are getting too many omega-6s, too many of the, which are good fats, nuts and seeds. But if we get too many, they can be potentially inflammatory. Whereas we want to get more of the fish oils, the, avocados and, good fats. Omega-3 fatty acids are going to help regulate, if you will, bile flow as well. So part of it is balancing, potentially it's getting somebody on an omega-3, fish oil supplement. I mean, most of the country needs those. There's taking some sort, right, to lower their cholesterol and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. There's nutrients that can help the gallbladder. Let's back up to foods. I mean, a very common food that will actually help thin the bile and help that cleanse properly is beets or beet leaf juice. I mean, I put beet leaves in my protein shakes that I make. I put them in my salads. That helps keep that bile thin and flowing well. So if a person's having a right-sided headache, for example, they might be able to drink some beet juice or, eat some beets, and that could be enough to actually take that down a few notches or even make the headache go away. So that'd be a food choices that would be good. B6 also helps, with bile production. So sometimes it's a need for a B6. B2, riboflavin is another one that helps keeps the bile flowing good. From an athletic perspective, it also helps with aerobic performance. So it helps with that fat metabolism. So there's nutrients like that we can consider to help keep the bile flowing properly and reduce the propensity for, say, a right-sided headache.
Interesting. So tell me a little bit about what are the other organ patterns or patterns of headaches that you see?
Yeah, so I mentioned there's 7 potential triggers that I lay out in the Headache Advantage book, coming soon to a venue near you. The book will be called The Headache Advantage. And backing up a little bit, the reason I call it Advantage is, in my world, clinically, the location of the head pattern tells me really where the priority is for a person. So if they had a right-sided headache, I'm 90% going to be starting with gallbladder for the big victory for that person as a patient, if you will. So that's where the advantage part comes. It helps us know, hey, this is where we need to target. And so that's the advantage part. And where we were talking about the other triggers, you said, other headaches.
Yeah.
So gallbladder's right-sided headache, then there's stomach can cause headaches. Hypothyroid can cause tension headaches in the back of the head. What I call a cyclops headache, that's typically a pituitary swelling type of a consideration. There's frontal headaches that are more poor stress tolerance, if you will. Those are very common. I think we said left-sided headaches, and then hormones is another very common trigger. And then so
Okay.
we can get into all the same things, as typical triggers for each of those different patterns.
Okay, got it. Interesting. So, where does all of this come from? Is this based on other traditions, or is this something that you have observed and worked with in your own career? Tell me a little bit about the history of this method.
Yeah, so early on, I got into an approach in natural healthcare called applied kinesiology that is taught to medical doctors, to chiropractors, to naturopaths, anybody typically licensed to diagnose. And that's the branch in medicine, if you will, that pulls the structural needs, the dietary needs, the emotional needs, and the supplemental needs all together under one umbrella. So
Hmm.
within that applied kinesiology, there's ways of identifying, what glandular organs compromise through the muscles, through reflex points, kind of like you see on the chart behind me here. Those all help me identify where the body's dysfunctioning at. And so that's, again, I got into healthcare as headache because of my own headaches. So I made it my mission, if you will, my life's mission to identify what those patterns were. And through this applied kinesiology approach, that's where I kind of really identified the 7 patterns. At this point, I don't see anybody else really talking about it. I'm hoping that through venues like this, we can get people researching it to say, hey, right-sided headaches, all these people had high cholesterol and had, were missing a gallbladder and, triggers like that. I'm hoping to kind of shape, if you will, research as well through this journey.
Interesting. Okay. And is there any kind of a connection to traditional Chinese medicine? When I hear organs and things like that, I sort of wonder if that's part of it as well.
For sure. And yes, a lot of it is based on that. Dr. Goodhart was the originator, if you will, of applied kinesiology. And he's the one that originally looked at, it was traditional Chinese medicine that identified the meridians going right through the muscles. And that's typically what would cause that muscle organ association. For example, the gallbladder meridian goes right diagonally through the back of the knee, right through the transverses, if you will, the popliteus muscle. And so that's where that weakness comes. That gives us a nice identification, nice tool to identify problems in that area.
Okay. All right. So it's sort of building on, the wisdom of many, many generations, sort of with a modern twist is how it sounds to me. Is that an accurate summary?
I like the way you summarize that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's taken that 1,000 years, 3,000-year-old, acupuncture, pulling in current biochemistry. And, my favorite thing to do is go to functional med seminars and, learn pathways and then figure out how to muscle test it and figure it out without having to have labs. Kind of that's the fun, if you will, in being creative in practice for me.
Yeah, cool. Can
Mhm.
you tell us a story about a patient who has used these methods and saw some good benefit?
For sure. How much time do you have?
Well, good. That's a great answer. Lots of
So,
benefit.
right. I mean, the reality is I've been doing this over 30 years now. I mean, easy example at this point was Judy was a, midlife kind of gal. And of course, midlife keeps getting older, the older I get.
Right. Same here.
Right. Judy had adult children that I'd been treating, and she was kind of standoffish and, yeah, I've been everywhere. What can you do for my headaches kind of thing,
Yeah.
as I was getting great victories with her adult children, and grandchildren in this case. And she finally decided, all right, let's give this a try. And we put her on probably 2 or 3 supplements, which in my world is a lot. I like to try to narrow it down to a single supplement if I can, or a single food trigger. In her case, tomatoes of all things, tomatoes tend to affect acetylcholine, which is the brain's control of the gallbladder. So tomatoes in her case were a trigger for her right-sided headaches. And we also put her on a product that thinned the bile called AF beta food. Again, thins the bile and actually causes a little bit of contraction. So between those combinations and then with the AF beta food, she knows that if she feels a headache starting to come on, she can take that supplement and it actually will work as a medicine or, an antidote to help bring the pain down. So it's probably been 4 years since she's really had, any substantial headache, by
Wow.
doing this approach.
That's crazy. That's a really good response because those people who are having a lot of headaches, especially the ones who have started to go into chronification, they're having more than a couple headache days a week, that they're hard,
Right.
that there's a reason that migraine is the #1 cause of disability in women under 50 because these changes start to happen in the brain. So that's incredible to be seeing good results, even with people who are in that situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, chronification is a big thing.
Yeah.
No more
Yeah.
chronification.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. We're both on that mission, right?
Let's carry that banner.
Yeah, exactly. So let's rewind a little bit in your life. Let's just go
Okay.
back to, what really made you want to do this? you mentioned that, you started on this path when you were pretty young. What was the turning point for you when you really knew, all right, this is what I'm going to do, and I see things in this new way, and I want to
Mhm.
share this with more people?
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'm a bit of a rebel.
Mm-hmm.
And those of you that look at blood type stuff, B positive tends to be a little bit more rebellious and non-conforming.
Mm-hmm.
So early on, I passed out at one point, was diagnosed hypoglycemic. I was
Mm-hmm.
14 at that point. And I'm like, yeah, kind of poo-pooed it. And then I realized every time I ate sugar, I'd get into trouble. I'd, make bad choices. And I was pretty much a punk at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I was in junior high. I'd go hang out at Winchell's, the donut shop, before and after school, and I'd get into trouble.
Oh
So,
my gosh, that's so funny. There was a Winchell's by my high school too. That
yeah,
was like the late night hangout spot.
that's
We're the same era.
right. So
Okay, keep
I'd
going,
go
keep
spend
going.
my $2 at the time on the biggest donut I could get, and that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. And again, I got into trouble and made bad choices. So once I recognized, I was playing racquetball at the time, I'd play really hard for 10 minutes and then I could care less. And I just stand in the back of the room. And so my loving mom says, well, what'd you eat? I'm like, well, I had donut, of course, and so that was a lights on, kind of aha moment for me that sugar really didn't work for me. So again, 14 years old, I quit eating sugar at that point and never turned back. And that's been
No
decades.
way. Really? At
Yeah.
14, you had that much willpower?
Right. So I wish I
Wow.
could bottle that. I'd love to be able to, here, take this.
Yeah, yeah. There'd be a big market for that. There really would.
Right, indeed. So that was the first epiphany. And then about 19, I was into natural bodybuilding and drug tested competitions. And I started getting these radical headaches that would, migraines that would pound and throb. We're trying to figure it out. I quit working out for a little bit to see if that helped. Didn't make much difference. For me, it was every time I do bench press, my head would just start throbbing and pounding. I did all the anti-inflammatories, tried to knock it down that way. Couldn't get resolution. So we went to to a medical doctor, as my parents obviously lovingly did. And we're like, you might have an aneurysm,
Right.
warning, warning, warning.
Hmm.
So we did a CAT scan with dye and all that sort of stuff. And they said, well, Scott, you don't have a aneurysm, so go see a psychiatrist. And that was,
Wow.
and that was okay, that's their answer, right?
Yeah.
So being a bit of a rebel, I'm like, I don't think that's really the answer. And
Yeah.
that's really where my journey started. I took a self-interest test trying to figure out a career for myself. Chiropractic was my highest because I was already into structure. I was a bodybuilder, right? And
Hmm.
nutrition. I quit eating sugar. I'd been watching my own diet so much by that point that chiropractic was a high score. Had my first adjustment, about at 19 years old. My headaches went poof. At that point, he adjusted C2. Mine were kind of an intestinal type of a headache, which I forgot to talk
Mm.
about in our discussion. So mine were a whole head pattern. And so getting adjusted at that point was like, wow, this is wonderful. I want everybody else to experience this bliss that I was now enjoying driving my little yellow bug home, on the freeway.
That's great. I love it. And I just want to follow up on one thing you said there, which was, you went to the doctor, they did the CAT scan, and then they told you essentially this is emotional.
Right.
Go see a psychiatrist. How do you, I mean, the brain is a mind-body organ, and I think we have to heal at the level of the mind as well as the body in
Mhm.
order to really get to the place of wellness that we want to be. I'm curious, do you now bring that awareness or philosophy into the work that you do where you are focused on that emotional piece?
Big time.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, I mean, every condition, every visit, I'm doing a lot of emotional clearing. I use an
Hmm.
approach called neuro-emotional technique that Scott Walker and has originally taught me.
Hmm.
He has one foundation, ONE, research foundation that does a lot of research on how clearing that can physically change cholesterol, for example, or objective measures by doing emotional work. Really kind of substantiates it, if you will. So
Hmm.
yes, we talked about gallbladder has anger, frustration, resentment type emotions. Liver and gallbladder both share those, and so yeah, there's ways to desensitize the body, the nervous system, to those emotional triggers so that they don't continue to plague us.
Interesting. So it's a technique that helps the body clear
Right.
out those emotions. We're so used to thinking that, it's talk therapy or things
Mhm.
like that. So it's interesting to hear the idea of a technique that we can use
Right.
that can help
And
us with those issues as
exercise, the
well.
stuff you're talking about, you talked about doing yoga and things to help reduce your headaches, right? That
Yeah.
all helps us handle those emotions, right? I mean, for me,
Mhm.
it's bicycle therapy.
Uh-huh.
Go ride my bike and kind of clear my head and organize my thoughts at that point. So
Uh-huh.
things that help prevent us from storing those emotions, one is exercise, keeping a healthy lifestyle. Two is minerals. Minerals give us a little bit more, I call it making us more rock-like than sponge-like. So minerals cause, intestinal integrity. They help us be more resilient against those emotional onslaughts. We're all going to have them, right? The stress can't go away. We just need to be able to handle it better.
Yeah.
So, eating organic vegetables tend to have literally thousands of times the amount of minerals in them. So, I'm a big fan of, make sure you're getting your organic vegetables so you don't get the pesticides, but then you have those minerals so that you're more impervious to the emotional junk that we're all going to be exposed to.
Interesting. Well, I mean, we do know, of course, that magnesium deficiency is a common cause of headaches. And,
Right.
you have to measure the magnesium properly. The standard magnesium measurements that we do in mainstream medicine usually don't pick it up because that's such a tiny percentage of our total magnesium stores.
Right.
And we have to look at the red blood cell magnesium in particular to get a better estimation of the total body stores of magnesium as well as the stores of magnesium within the brain, because we know
Right.
from very advanced imaging studies that people with headaches, especially chronic headaches, do tend to have depleted supplies of magnesium. And whether that's, there's less magnesium in our food, or we're chewing through it trying to handle the demands of modern day life, or whatever it is that's behind that, it
Mhm,
is
mhm.
probably the number one supplement that helps people with headaches.
I agree,
Yeah,
100%. Well stated.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And
All right.
magnesium is somewhat calming, which would more tend to relate to a frontal headache in my world.
Okay, gotcha.
Mhm,
Interesting. All
mhm.
right. So, what kind of person should buy your book? Like, who are you talking to? Who are you trying to help in your book?
Yeah, those with headaches.
Okay.
It's headache advantage because we want people to learn from their headaches and get rid of them. So if, the listener or a loved one is dealing with headaches, I'm hoping to present them with solutions to get to the cause of it. Mhm.
Got it. Great. And do you have some action tips for us in the book? Once we
Yeah.
understand what it is that's causing our own headaches, is that part of what you talk about in the book as well? Real, hands-on, take action now kind of solutions for people?
Yes. So the book is laid out with, sections 1 and 2 lay the foundation of the causes of the headaches and what the triggers are. And then section 3 is more getting to the solutions. These are the supplements you might consider and things to do that way, and emotional triggers, emotional clearing. And then on the headacheadvantage.com is where I also have some of those flow charts with, the ability to look at food triggers or supplements that a person might want to consider or try. Mhm.
That sounds like a really important resource, the headacheadvantage.com. Love it.
Without
Thank you.
I just made it headache advantage, trying to simplify people's life.
Headache advantage. Okay, got it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
super helpful. All
Thank you.
right.
Mhm.
Anything else that you wanted to tell us about the book?
Yeah, it's coming soon at this point. It's in editing right now. So it's about a month away, but the Headache Advantage website is up and running with countdown timer and
Mm-hmm.
those flow charts. So through the flow charts, listeners can start making proper changes until we can put that hot little book in your hands.
Yeah, then you get the whole picture
Indeed.
once you read the book. Got it.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Okay. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing to help people with headaches. And
Mhm.
thank you so much for taking the time to share this unique approach to headache management. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the great interview and the opportunity to share. What a blessing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Well, it's Dr. B and Dr. V signing off. Thank you so much for being here today. And go check out that website.
Thank you. Bye-bye.